Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to this new series on the Rambam's 13 Principles of Faith. I'm here with my cousin Michael Kalati.
Nice to be back in your garden.
Yes.
With the birds tweeting.
Absolutely. Okay. And we're very excited about this series. We're going to take this opportunity to do an introduction. Over to Michael.
Before the introduction, we wanted to... We thought of doing this series in memory of two dear members of family that unfortunately passed away this year. Our dear Auntie Leah and our cousin Joel, who both epitomized the concept of holding strong and ethical principles throughout their lives. And so this series should be commemorative in their names.
Okay, and we're going to dedicate this in their names. So Lilui Nishmat, Leah bat Mazal Tov, and Yoel ben Tzivia va'Avraham. Baruch Hashem Tinachem Gan Eden.
So we know that Rambam compiled a list of 13 principles that he inserted at the end of his rather long commentary on Perek Chelek in Sanhedrin, chapter 10. And I guess before we start, maybe mention some words about Rambam's life.
Yeah, okay. Seeing as this is the Rambam's 13 principles. So just briefly, Rambam was born in 1138 in Cordoba in Spain. He was one of the most influential Jewish philosophers. He was also a legal scholar and a physician. Born into a distinguished rabbinic family under Muslim rule, Cordoba. His father was Maimon ben Yosef, hence Rambam's name, Maimonides, son of Maimon. His father was a respected scholar and judge in and of himself, ensuring that his son received an extensive education in Jewish texts, philosophy, and the sciences. When Rambam was 10 years old, the Berber Muslim dynasty conquered Cordoba, and as a result, Rambam went to Fez. So in Fez, Maimonides deepened his studies in medicine, philosophy, and Islamic thought while continuing, of course, his own Jewish studies. The family later moved to the land of Israel for a brief period before finally settling in a place called Fustat, which is Old Cairo in Egypt, around the year 1168. Rambam's contributions to Jewish law were unparalleled and are unparalleled. His first major work, which was a commentary of the Mishnah, the Perush HaMishnayot, was written in the original in Judeo-Aramaic, provided clear, concise explanations of the Mishnah, which is, of course, the foundational text of Jewish oral law, the Torah Baal Peh. Now, this work introduced his famous 13 Principles of Faith, which we're discussing today, which articulated fundamental Jewish beliefs, including the unity of God, divine revelation, and the coming of Mashiach. We know his magnum opus was the Mishnah Torah. We already have a series on that, which is on my Torah Anytime channel, which is a 14-volume systematic code of Jewish law written in Hebrew. Completed in 1180, the Mishnah Torah organized and clarified Jewish legal tradition, making it accessible to all without requiring expertise in the Gemara. Rambam was deeply influenced by Greek philosophy, particularly Aristotle, as well as Islamic thinkers like Farabi, more about him later, and Avicenna. His most famous philosophical work, which is the Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide for the Perplexed, was again written in Judeo-Arabic in the original, sought to reconcile Jewish theology with Aristotelian philosophy. In this guide, Rambam argued that reason and faith were not in conflict, but rather complemented each other. He emphasized the use of rational thought in understanding Hashem and the universe, rejecting literal interpretations of anthropomorphic descriptions of Hashem in the Torah. Ultimately, he became a personal physician to Salah ad-Din, who was the king at the time. Rambam exemplifies the synthesis of religious faith and intellectual inquiry, shaping the course of Jewish thought for centuries. Today, the Rambam is celebrated not only as one of the Jewish people's greatest scholars, but also as a bridge between religious tradition and rational thought, making his teachings relevant far beyond his time.
So let's begin our analysis or introduction of the 13 principles. So they are stated in the long introduction to Perek Chalek in Sanhedrin in chapter 10. Basically, the introduction deals with metaphysical concepts such as the world to come, Gan Eden, and reward and punishment to some extent, and also prophecy. The Rambam states the quality of existence in Olam Haba, how much it outweighs anything we can imagine here of our material or physical pleasures, and then goes on to describe or state that without refining oneself, it's likely that you won't make it to Gan Eden or the world to come. That's the basis of some of the idea of creating these 13 principles, to serve as a warning that really it is incumbent on every Jew to take on and accept and fully comprehend as much as humanly possible these 13 principles, specifically the first 5, which deal with the understanding of God. He goes on to describe also in the commentary what Gan Eden will be like. And he further along in the commentary describes messianic times, quotes, I think, Ezekiel, where it talks about how peace will cover the earth like water. He also touches on the concept of prophecy. God delivers knowledge and wisdom through these servants. Then he goes on to describe the type of person and actions that have to be committed that would cause people to be cut off from the world to come. So he describes, and I quote this from the commentary, and concerning others enumerated by the Mishnah as not having a share in the world to come, the word apikores is Aramaic. Its meaning is one who abandons mafkir and denigrates sages or a specific Torah or denigrates his teaching. I think we've also learned the severe consequences of insulting your rabbi, talking bad about Rabbonim in other sections of Mishnah Torah in the beginning. He continues in this commentary, and one who whispers an incantation over a wound. In other words, one who believes that health and healing can come through alternate sources rather than direct from God. He also says anybody who mentions the Shem HaMaforash, Yud Kei Vav Kei, they have also no share in the world to come. He also quotes from Baba Metzia 59 on the base, one who whitens the face of his fellow in public, and one who calls his friend by a nickname, and also from Yerushalmi Chagiga 2:1, one who derives honor from his friend's disgrace. And he continues and concludes this 5,000-word commentary. I quote, since one would not do from these acts, and even though one might think them to be light sins, except for one with an inferior spirit that does not have wholeness and is not fitting for the world to come, and from that which is necessary that we mention here, and here is the most fitting of all places, is that the fundamental beliefs and the foundational principles of our religion are 13 principles. And then he goes on to describe in detail 13 principles of faith, which was his intention to codify as a moral obligation to follow. And, very importantly, the non-observance of any single one of these principles would result in a person not being suitable to exist in the world to come.
So you're trying to say that the Rambam says that a person can do other sins, let's say that not part of the 13 principles, but and then he'd be accountable for them. But if he transgresses any one of these 13,
yes, he says,
what's the difference between that and any other sin? So,
well, I think we're going to learn later on, and specifically in next episode, where we deal with each principle one by one, that the first 5 were really the most important for Rambam: the understanding and the acceptance of the unity of God, of the various aspects of God. It's even the Mishnah Torah is kind of separated into 2 sections. The first 4 chapters of Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah deal with the understanding of the metaphysical components of God and understanding. And then it goes on. The second section of the Mishnah Torah is actually the rest of the Mishnah Torah. And the rest, understanding halacha and performing the actions, brings you back to the fulfillment of the first 4 chapters. So the importance of the first 4, the acceptance, the understanding, the accepting that God is not like a man with a white beard, really changing people's typical concepts of God to a more profound philosophical understanding was paramount importance to the Rambam. And it's so much so that he stated that if you don't make an effort to understand these concepts, then you probably have no rights to be in the world to come. If we believe in things like reincarnation, perhaps you need another go at understanding, another lifetime.
Oh, wow.
But I'm going to quote in full, just to give an example of the 13 principles, when he states it in this imagery, how it sounds, how a principle sounds. So the first principle, he quotes, to believe in the existence of the Creator, may be blessed, and that is that there is a being complete in all the ways of existence. He is the cause of the existence of all other things in existence. Through him does their existence survive, and from him is their survival. And one cannot imagine the lack of his existence, since in the lack of his existence, the existence of all other things dissolves. No thing's existence would survive. And if we were to imagine the lack of all other things in existence beside him, the existence of God, may he be blessed, would not dissolve and not be diminished. Unity and mastery only belong to God, may his name be blessed, since he suffices in his own existence. It is enough for him to be by himself, and he doesn't need the existence of anything else. And everything beside him, of the angels and the bodies of the planets, and what is in them and what is below them, all need him for their existence. And this is the first principle, and it is indicated by the first commandment, I am the Lord your God, from Exodus 20, verse 2. So that's an example of the complexity of each quoted principle, which we will go through in each episode. But I wanted to give an example. So let's just very quickly list the 13 principles. Number 1, the existence of God. Number 2, the unity of God. Number 3, the incorporeality of God.
Just for clarity, what does incorporeality mean?
It's it's not human, not a physical being. It's not a corporeal. You cannot imagine God as being like a white bearded giant in the sky or any type of human being. There's no corporeality. It's a kind of, it's not, you cannot base it on a human understanding that it's a person or some type of physical being.
Okay.
Number 4, God is absolutely without beginning. Number 5, God alone is worthy of worship. Number 6, prophecy, the truth of prophecy. Number 7, the unique prophecy of Moses. Number 8, the Torah in its entirety is from heaven. Number 9, the Torah will never be abrogated or changed. Number 10, God is cognizant of the actions of human beings and is not neglectful of humanity. Number 11, the belief in divine reward and retribution. Number 12, the coming of the Messiah. And number 13th principle is the resurrection of the dead. So we can look at this list of 13 principles. We can actually categorize them into 3 subsets. The first, the 1 to 5, deal with God itself. Principles 6 through 9 deal with the Torah and the concept of revelation. And the principles 10 through 13 describe reward and punishments. Now, why is the 13 principles so unique, and why is it creating so much fuss? Our religion doesn't really command us to have a belief or dogma, but at the time, in 10th, 11th century, 10th century world, Judaism competed with Christianity and Islam, which had their set of principles and dogma and creeds. And perhaps it was fitting that a series of principles should be formulated to not compete, but to be. It was influenced by the state of the times. We know that our religion is based more on tradition and actions and thoughts as opposed to these dogmatic beliefs that other religions hold. I also want to describe or look at the philosophic influence that was perhaps formative in this formation of the 13 principles, specifically from the 9th century philosopher Farabi, who we know that Maimonides deeply influenced, regarded in the highest possible terms. But before we look at the Farabi influence on the 13 principles, let's look at the kind of timeline of the events at the time. So we know that Maimonides completed his commentary on the Mishnah, which was written in Judeo-Arabic when he was around 30 years old. It was shortly after having arrived in Egypt. Already in the Mishnah, sages had treated certain beliefs as mandatory, and their non-acceptance leading to branding of a person as a heretic who would lose his portion in the world to come. A number of those beliefs actually appear in Perek Helek, which Rambam's commentary is a preface to. There were various. We learn in Perek Helek about the belief that the Torah came from heaven and that it teaches belief in the resurrection of the dead. So the Rambam had a convenient place to insert a complete set of principles that he believed would be at the right place, at the right time for people to adopt. The right time was important. So let's look now at what was the Rambam being influenced at the time by? We know that he was a student of Farabi. He was deeply influenced, also by Aristotle. But in this episode, we have indications of works by Farabi. The man who translated into Hebrew at the time of the writing of the Guides to the Perplexed was a man named Samuel ibn Tibbon. And the Rambam wrote a letter to Samuel ibn Tibbon. This is recorded by Shlomo Pines, who is the authoritative translator of the Guide into English. This letter was written to Samuel ibn Tibbon by the Rambam at the time of the publication of the Guide. And Shlomo Pines notes that, and I quote, the letter from Maimonides to Samuel ibn Tibbon includes a list of important works in philosophy to study, and Al-Farabi's works were amongst them, and which would also enable the reader and translator to more fully understand his treatise, the Guide to the Perplexed. From amongst the philosophers closer to his own period, Maimonides praises Al-Farabi in particular. The Arabic original of the letter is unfortunately lost, but all the Hebrew versions that exist confirm the following, that the Rambam extols the logical writing of Al-Farabi and treats them as completely accurate. And to quote Rambam on Al-Farabi, for he was a great man. So obviously high praise for this deep influence. So let's look very quickly at the Al-Farabi biography.
Okay. The very interesting character, this Al-Farabi. His fields of philosophical interest include, but not limited to, philosophy of society and religion. You can see how that would appeal to the Rambam already. Philosophy of language and logic, psychology and epistemology, metaphysics, political philosophy, and ethics. He was an expert in both practical musicianship and music theory. And although he was not intrinsically a scientist, his works incorporate astronomy, mathematics, cosmology, and physics. He definitely had what to talk to the Rambam about. That he was more than a pioneer in Islamic philosophy can be deduced from the habit of later authors calling him the second master, the first master being, as we mentioned before, Aristotle. Lawrence Berman, who was a student of the aforementioned Shlomo Pines, had a quote that says, I think it's quite clear that in the Guide for the Perplexed, as well as the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam accepted the Alpha-Arabian view of the development and functions of religion, jurisprudence, and dialectical theology and their relation to philosophy, and tried to apply it to the Jewish religion. In this effort, Rambam was the disciple of Al-Farabi.
So that was a quote by a student of Shlomo Pines. And also anybody who's familiar with the Rambam's work, including the commentary and also the Shmona Parakim, will notice that Rambam frequently quotes the philosophers. And obviously, Aristotle was one of them, but secondly, for sure, Al-Farabi was a major influence. He studied Al-Farabi. And what is very important to understand is that whenever the Rambam talks about the philosophers, it wasn't in a denigrating way at all. It was very much the opposite. Whenever they were referenced, it was not to negate the views of these philosophers from other religions, but to demonstrate his own and Judaism's agreement with these views. We know the very famous line, know the truth from whomever utters it. It's actually from, I think it's Shmona Parakim commentary, the Shmona Parakim.
Yeah.
8 chapters. Very important mindset of Rambam. He understood that God will deliver wisdom from anybody, whether it be Jew, non-Jew, man or woman, who reaches the required state of refinement and reaches a level that is in consonance with God's and will use them in some way to deliver wisdom to humanity. And he understood this, so he had respect for these philosophers, hence know the truth from whoever utters it.
Which is also from Pirkei Avot, which should, Eze hu chacham halomed b'kol adam. Who is wise? One who learns from anyone. The truth can be anywhere. Also, I can't imagine this respect for Farabi and Aristotle, among others, must have I can't imagine it must have contributed to the Rambam's popularity.
I think at the time there was in Egypt, I guess at the time, and in the 10th century, 11th century, there was more the sharing of knowledge. It wasn't perhaps today it's it's a very aggressive time. I think then there was a celebration of wisdom, and Rambam specifically even published some of his works in Arabic, specifically to have a wide audience, to the Arab population, perhaps, and again, most importantly, he recognized God will deliver wisdom through every channel, and that you have to accept that the truths, real truths, can come from all sources.
Interesting.
So let's talk a little bit about Rambam's, what was behind these 13 principles? What was the ultimate aim? It seems that Rambam, in his own mind, had concepts of the ideal state. He had principles regarding the greatest form of community, how, as a volume, a huge volume of people, how things can be swayed in a political, philosophical manner. So he had three main beliefs. Number one, he had a belief in God and in a certain order in the world that influenced people to mold their political actions in accordance with the cosmic order. This way, a city remains stable. So if people have a deep belief in God, it's likely that the outcome is that the city dwellers have some sort of moral backbone, and as a quote, the city remains stable. Number two, if the opinions of the masses are close to the opinions of the philosophers, the philosopher will find it easier to live within the state and guide it without friction. So if everybody understands things from a deep philosophical way, there is better understanding, and life can move forward in a thoughtful way, in the best way. Number three, if the opinions of the masses are close to the philosophical truth, individuals of a philosophical nature will find it easier to achieve true philosophical knowledge. They can attain such knowledge without having first to free themselves from the habits of faith, which may oppose philosophical truths. We know that the Rambam regarded the basic knowledge of physics and different types of philosophy as almost mandatory obligations in the completion of a perfect human being. It's very important to understand. Also, the Rambam most likely developed these 13 principles as a way to ensure that the masses wouldn't continue in any false beliefs. So, although the severity of punishment for non-observance, as Rambam stated, were as big as you can get, he was concerned that that the people would not live their lives really basically believing in falsities. In laying down these principles, Rambam was actually furthering the deep and true aims of the Torah. Also, the Rambam believed that unless you really understand, unless in your mind you have a correct concept of God, if you perform halacha, but for example, you believe a corporeality of God, you are in effect performing idolatry. So if you are not 100% aligned with what is the correct conception of God, when you perform halacha, you are literally worshipping, and I quote, a strange God. So let's look at some of the works that could have influenced Rambam by Farabi. There was one book that we are sure that the Rambam studied deeply, and that was the book entitled Aphorisms of the Statesman by Farabi. Just to explain, an aphorism is an observation that contains the truth. So, when Rambam speaks of knowing the truth from one who utters it, he definitely had Aristotle and Al-Farabi in mind. So what was there in this aphorisms of the statesman that appealed to the Rambam? I'm going to quote a passage from this book that concerns a city governed by the ideal ruler. So we're coming now to the perhaps conception that these 13 principles were more about communal and community spirits and community developments as a foundational, at the foundations of a ideal state. So I quote from this Aphorisms of the Statesman. In this city, love, mahava is the word he uses, first comes about for the sake of sharing in virtue. And that is connected with sharing in opinions and actions. The opinions of the citizens ought to share in are about three things: the beginning, the end, and what is in between the two. Agreement of opinion about the beginning is agreement of their opinions about God, may he be exalted, about the spiritual things, and about the devout who are the standards, how the world and its parts began, how human beings began to come about, then the ranks of the parts of the world, the link of some to others, and their level with respect to God, may he be exalted, and to the spiritual beings. Then the level of human beings with respect to God and to the spiritual beings. So this is the beginning. The end is happiness. What is in between the two is the actions through which happiness is gained. When the opinions of the inhabitants of the city are in agreement about these things, and that is then perfected by the actions through which happiness is gained for some with others, that is necessarily followed by the love of some for others. So, very interesting excerpt from his book. We're going to talk about it in the next episode, but anybody who studied Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah will see some sort of mirroring of subjects. But we'll come to that perhaps in the next episode. So the Farabi talks about the beginning, end, and what is in between. Three subsets of life. The Rambam also, you can subset his 13 principles into God's revelation and rewards. What perhaps reinforces our belief that this was an influence on Maimonides is the way that Rambam concludes his commentary on before Perek Chelek on his 13 principles. And I quote, "When all these principles are perfectly understood and believed in by a person, he enters the community of Israel, and one is obligated to love and pity him and to act towards him in all ways in which the Creator has commanded that one should act towards his brother with love, mahabah, and fraternity." So, the Rambam here is stressing the importance that these principles are actually about love of your fellow human being and how to live together in an ideal state of fraternity, mutual benefits. And I think that if you really analyze it, you will accept that that the influence is quite stark in relation to Farabi's work, Aphorisms of the Statesman, and the basic concepts and the structure of the 13 principles and their ultimate aims. And I think the next episode, we're going to delve into the first principle, and each episode will be a different principle. And I look forward to delivering those.
Bezrat Hashem. Wow, thank you very much, Michael. Okay, we hope you enjoyed that introduction to the Rambam's 13 Principles of Faith. Until the next time, Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen. Amen.